Taf Yud Dalet Amud Beis will begin Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, the second line from the bottom. Tanya. So we were learning previously about the Yam Shel Shloima, the pool that Shlomo Melech made in the Beis Hamikdash. Tanya Rabbi Chia, Yam Shel also Shloima, the Yam that Shlomo Melech made. Vayamachzik Me'ah v'chamisha mikvatar. It was large enough to hold the equivalent of 150 mikvois. The minimum shear for a mikveh is Arboim Saw. This yam could hold 150 times that. What's the shear of a mikveh, the minimum shear? How much water as a minimum do you must have in a mikveh? Kamahava Arboim Saw. It's 40 saw. Kedisanya, we learned Verochas. It says that he washes Verochas as Besaram B'mayim. Really, the precise lashon of the pasuk is Verochas B'mayim es kol Besarim. So he washes his body completely. He has to immerse himself completely in the waters of the mikvah. B'mayim, it says B'mayim. We say one means B'may mikvah. It means that it has to be a water. You don't need mayim chaim. It means mayim. It doesn't say mayim chaim. It's mayim, meaning a mei mikvah. Kol besarai, it's his entire body. Mayim shekol gufa oila behem. It has to be enough water that when he immerses himself in the mikvah, it covers his body completely. V'kamahen, what's that shiur? Amma al amma barum shalosh amas. That if it's an amma and an amma with a height of 3 ammas. So if you have a square, then the area of the mikveh has to be an amma by an amma with a height of 3 ammas. With a height of 3 ammas, that is the minimum size of a mikveh, and it is therefore and the Chomor Meshayar that in this area, in this type of a pool, it will hold 40 saw. So the minimum amount of water to be a kosher mikveh is 40 saw. So now we'll make a calculation that the mikveh, the Yam Shel Shloima, it can hold 150 mikvahs. So we learned that the dimensions of the Yam Shel Shloima, it says that the dimensions where he made is Eser B'am Misvas L'Svas. And Chomesh Amas Koimos, so it was 10. So it was now, initially we're going to assume that it was square. It wasn't. It was circular. But we'll start off assuming that it was a square, and then we'll translate that and transfer that into the dimension of a circle. But right now, let's assume a square. So if we say it was 10 by 10, and it was a height of 5. So therefore, what is the total amount of volume? How much water can you contain in that area, in that type of a pool? So therefore we says Kamahavla, it was Chomesh Me'ez Garmina. It was 500. If you take 10 by 10 by 5, 10 by 10 is 100, times 5 is 500, so it can hold 500 cubic, it was 500 cubic amas. So therefore, now we're taking 500, we're going to now make that what the equivalent of what the amount of mikvois, how many mikvois you could put in that. So therefore we say, L'tlas mea mea. From 300, you can make 100 mikvois. Because we said a mikveh is amal amma b'rum shalosh amas. One mikveh is an amma by an amma with a height of 3. So one mikveh is the equivalent of 3 cubic ammas. Now over here we're saying that the Yam Shel Shloima was 150. So therefore, if we translate that, we have from 300, you can make 100 mikvois. Each mikveh is 3 cubic ammas. And if we have, therefore, 300, from 300 cubic ammas, you can take 100 mikvois. Now, like we said, the Yam Shel Shleima, assuming it's a square, is 500. So take 300 from the 500. That's the equivalent of 100 mikvahs. A mikveh is one mikveh is 1 by 1 by 3 is 3 cubic amas. A mikveh of the Yam Shel Shleima was 500. Take 300 from that, and 300 makes 100 mikvahs. Each mikveh is 3. That's 100 mikvahs. Now, what do we have? Now we're saying you can make 150 mikvahs. Well, if that's the case, now the may have a chamshin. To make another 50, you only need 150 cubic amas. For 300 is 100 mikvahs. For now, if you tell me there's 150 mikvahs in the Yam Shel Shleima, then you only need another 150. 150 divided by 3 is 50. 300 makes 100 mikvahs, and half of that, 150, makes 50 mikvahs. So therefore, Barba Me'avachamshin Sagya, why do you say 500? With 450 you can come and reach to the amount of 150 mikvahs. And the Yam Shel Shleima L'chera was 500. More says no. Hani Mila B'Ravua. Where do we say that we have that there's 500 cubic mikvahs if it would have been square? If it would have been square, you're saying that it's 10 by 10 by 5. Yes, this would have been 500. It would have been 500 cubic mikvahs, and it would have been more than 150 mikvahs. However, that was not the case. Yam Shel Shleima Ogolaya, but the Yam Shel Shleima was not square; it was round. So if something is round, if you put a circle in a square, the corners are cut off. So the corners, which are in the square, are not in the circle, are outside the circle. So a circle, which has a dimension of 10 by 10 by 5, does not hold 500 cubic amas. It's less. So how much is a square? A square 10 by 10 by 5, how much larger is it than a circle which has a diameter of 10? So what's the difference between the Ravin? A quarter. Meaning this is a quarter more than the circle that's inside of it. So this is a quarter more milbar, which is a third milgav. So, meaning in a circle, if you take a third of the circle and add it onto the circle, you'll get the square. If you'll take the square and subtract 25% of the area of the square, you'll come to the area of the circle. So therefore, la'arba mea. So if you take from the 400, so we said there was 500 cubic amas in a square. In the square, that's 10 by 10 by 5. So take 400 of them and reduce it by a quarter. Now we're transferring the area, from the square to a circle. So that means the area is now a quarter less. So if you take 400 of the 500, reduce it by a quarter, what do you have is 300. And therefore, that makes 100 mikvahs. Each mikvah is 3 cubic amas, so that makes 100 mikvahs. Now we have 100 left from the 500, from the square, from the 500 cubic amas we have 100 left. Lamea esrim v'chamish. From that 100, reduce it by a quarter, so that leaves 75. So 75 cubic amas translates to how many mikvahs? So that's 25. Esrim v'chamisha. It's 25. 3 per mikvah, 25. So therefore, Hani me'av esrim v'chamisha, but you only have 125, and you're telling me that there's 150 mikvahs. So monashach. If it was a square, it wasn't a square, but in a square, it's more than 150 mikvahs. In a circle, it's less. It's only 125. So how do you arrive at the number of that Yam Shel Shleima could hold 150 mikvahs? So Tani Ram, it was not completely square, not completely round. Shalosh Amas Tachtainas Merubas. The bottom 300 were square. And then at the top, it became round. It became round at the top. So it was square at the bottom, but then it rounded at the top. So we look at it as two different sections when we calculate the area. So it was Shalosh Amas Tachtainas Merubas. The bottom 3 amas were square. Ushtaim Elyanis Agulas. And the top 2 in the height were agulas. From the top 2 on top, it was round. So therefore, what's the calculation? Well, I say the bottom 3 were square. That means if you look at a square, this is the bottom component, look at the square, it was 10 by 10 by 10 with a height of 3. That's 300 cubic amas, which is exactly 100 mikvahs. Each mikvah is 3, and this was an area of 300. So it's 100 mikvahs. Now, if it had the area on the top, which is 10 by 10 with a height of only 2, so if it was a square, 10 by 10 with a height of 2, that would make 200. That would make an area of 200. If I reduce it by a quarter, if I subtract a quarter of the 200, that's 50. That leaves 150. Each mikveh is 3. That's a total of 50 mikvahs. So that's how I have a total of 150 mikvahs. The bottom part was square. So it was 10 by 10 by 3, which is 300, is 100 mikvahs. The top part was round. Now, if it would have been a square, the area would have been 10 by 10 by 10, which is 200. But it's a circle, so reduce it by a quarter, which is 150, which is 50 mikvahs, a total 150 mikvahs. So when it says need if cholei matzah samras, you can't say the reverse. You can't say that the top was square and the bottom was round, because dalat tzvas ogel ksiv, it says that it was circular on top. The rim was circular. Ela ema chada. But why not say that only one amma on top was round? So it has to be that the top of it, the rim, was round. But why say the top 2 ammas were round? Why not say only the top 1 amma was round? And then, of course, you'd have less than 150 mikvahs. But when it says lois al kadait, you can't say that. Because the chsiv alpayim bas yachil. It says alpayim bas, that the mikveh held, yachil, it held alpayim 2,000 bas. So it had to be that there was a total of 150 mikvahs, because it says there was alpayim bas. Now, what is a bas? Kama bas have. How much is a bas? Shalosh soin. A bas is 3 soin. So therefore, if it had 2,000 bas, that means it had a total of 6,000 soin. T'chsi meiser habas min akur. That the measurement of a bas is a meiser, is a tenth of a kur. So it's a tenth of a kur. A kur is 30 saw, and therefore a bas is 3 saw. Davla shisal agrive, and therefore the total amount is alpayim. So the total amount is 6,000 saw. 6,000 saw. So therefore, if it was 6,000 saw, that's 150 mikvahs, because a mikveh is arboim saw, it's 40 saw. So 40 saw is 1 mikveh. If there's 6,000, it's 150. 150 times 40 is 6,000. I affect the Gemara, but there's a stira. Here it says that in Malachim it says that it was alpayim bas, vaksiv, in Divrei Yom it says machzik batim shloishes alofim. It says 2,000. In Malachim it says 3,000 rather. In Malachim it says 2,000. In Divrei Yom it says machzik batim shloishes alofim 3,000. So was it 2,000 or 3,000? Moran says how lagucha. The volume of the mikveh, the pool itself, was 2,000 bas, but then it was piled high, meaning it was to the top, and which now was over the rim. It extended a little bit over the rim. The pile of it was filled to the top, which now extended above the rim. And the goydesh, where it heaps up above the rim, that is an extra third. When you say that the area that it extends in a container, that it extends above the rim, it can extend above a third. It can extend above even a third as much. And we see that it's a third higher, because it says, Shira Tevu Migdal, if you have a carriage, or you have a box, or a migdal, or a closet, kaveres akasha, kaveres akanim, or a straw basket, or a basket made out of reeds, ubor svin Alexandrias, or you have a container in a ship, an Alexandria ship that they use to store water, afal pisheshim shulayim, and even though they have a bottom, so they're containers, they're kalim, and normally kalim are makabel tumam. So belach, if they're so large that they would be able to contain in them 40 saw in a liquid, shehem kurayim biyovish, which is the equivalent of kurayim, 2 kurs biyovish. Now a kur, we said was 30 saw. Kurayim 2 is 60. So we're saying that there is 40 saw belach and kurayim biyovish, which is 60. So it says the halach is that the taharim. The taharim, why are there taharim? Because it's a kli that you cannot be metal hal molav yarekin. In order to mekabel tuma from medavet to a sak, that's a kli that can be carried whether it's full or whether it's empty. So too, these other kalim have to be able to, they're mekabel tuma if they are not so large, if they're small enough, light enough that they can be carried whether they're full or they're empty. Now these are too big, they're so large, they're not makabel tuma because they're so large they cannot be metaltal when they're filled up, they can't be metaltal. But on kolpanim you see that in a liquid measure it's 40, with a dry measure it's 60, it's kurayim, which is 60. So how do we count for the difference? The difference is because when on the dry measure, you pile it up and you heap it up, it comes above the rim. It comes above the rim, and therefore, and it adds on. You can add on an extra third. So if you take a third from 60, and subtract a third from 60, it's 20, and that's equivalent to 40. So here also we see that when we're talking about in the pool of Shlomo Melech, it can contain alpayim bas. It can contain 2,000 bas. But that what it says, shleishes halofim, when it says 3,000 bas, that's referring to if you would be able to heap it up and pile it up, then it would the gutsha, the gaidish, in a dry measurement would be able to now come up, you'll be able to pile it up higher, and that accounts for the extra third, and that's why it refers to it as 3,000. Zok the Mishnah, the Chayayin Shamru, the lechis that we talked about, Goivenas or Tfachim, they have to be at least 10 Tfachim high. Verachman, the Ivan Kolshu, and the width and the thickness could be a Kolshu. But Rav Yesi Aimer Rachman Gimel Tfachim. Rav Yesi says no, the width has to be at least Gimel Tfachim. Zok the Gemara, L'chayin Shamru, so it says in the plural, the L'chayin, plural, it doesn't say Lechi. So let's say the Tana is going is like Rabbi Lezer, the Amil Chayayin being, and that it says so you need 2. It's not enough 1. You need 1 on each side. The one says like my Lechayayin, Lechayin Dalma. It doesn't mean particularly specifically that 2 lechis, that you need 2 lechis in a movie. In general, it's talking about a general term. Lechis, the lechis that we talked about. In general terms, they have to have either a kolshu, they're either kolshu is kosher, or they have to have a width of 3. When we talk about kaira, nami, nisne, kairis. Well, why would the Tana change the loshan? Why would he change in kaira? He says kaira in the singular. Lechi says in the plural. If he's talking about in general terms by the lechi, he would say that by the kaira as well. Why change that? So Yahachi by Kara Nami Nistik Kara, so my Kara is Dalma. So Gemara says no, Hachi Kama. Aysan Lachayim Shenechel Behemri Lezer Chachamim. What it means is as follows. Kaira, it says in the singular, we're talking about the kaira. A kaira you need for a movie. When we say lechi, we're not talking in the in general terms. The more is now changing its pshat, and therefore it says as follows: the oisen l'chaim shenechlam Rebbe Elazar Chachamim. We just brought down previously the machlokes Rebbe Elazar Chachamim by lechi. Those lechis that they talked about, that they argue about, that the Chacham say one, Rebbe Elazar says you need two. Those lechis that they were arguing about, those lechis given a sort of tvachim roiv havin kolshu have to be 10 high, but the length and the width rather than the thickness, Chacham say kolshu, and Rabbi Yossi says the width is gimel tvachim. The kama kolshu. What do we mean by kolshu? Tana Rabbi Chia afilu b'chur tasarbal. Even if it's as thin as the string of a cloak to tie up a cloak, even something like that, meaning as long as it's something that is usable and something that even a string to tie a cloak, that's enough. Let's say a person made the lechi for half the mavoi. So the mavoi was, there's the Rishus Harabim, and he made the lechi, instead of making it where you normally do in the entrance, he made it l'chatzi mavoi, he made it back here. So it's only here. So now this area is outside the lechi. The question is, on the inside part, well, it has a lechi here, no, it's not facing the street, but there is a lechi blocking it over here. So what's the din in such a case? So ein lo l'chatzi mavoi. He has only half a mavi. He can only carry in the inner part of the mavi up to the lechi, but not beyond. Well, of course, the area beyond the lechi, there's no heker, there's nothing dividing that from the street. Now, the chiddush is not that he can't carry in the area outside the lechi. Of course he can't, because there's no heker over there. But the chiddush is that he could carry in the area from the back part of the mavi, from the back of the mavi up until the lechi, that is mutter. That's also pasha. The order says no, it is a chiddush. You might think if we let you carry from the back half, you'll carry in the front half as well. You'll carry in the whole mavi, kamash malan, that we're not concerned. But the back half is mutter, that's a chiddush. Omarava also lechi lamavoi v'igbi mina karka shleisha oy sheflig mina kaisel shleisha loy also like klom. If he made the lechi and it's 3 off the ground, so he made it and it's 3 off the ground, or it's 3 away from the side posts. It doesn't come to the side wall; it's 3 away, so it's either off the ground 3, doesn't come to the ground, or it's away from the wall. If it's 3 tvachim or more, then it's possible, because I can't say lovid anymore, and therefore it's either hanging in the air, or it's now not attached to the wall, and I'll say the avira on both sides of it are mevatalit. If you have the air on both sides, there's air on this side, and there's air on this side, it's mavatal the lechi. So therefore, lo yosef lo klum. It's not a lechi. It's not considered a lechi. And I feel Rav Shimon Gamliel, who says Damina Lovud, who says you say love it up to 4. Now, so therefore, if it's even within 4 of the wall, it would be kosher, because I would say love it. But that's only if it's 4 away from the wall. But if it's suspended and it's in the air off the ground, but hani mile lemala, aval lamata kevan deham v'chitzah shgedim baikim boiloi al kol amar. Even though he would say lovud, so if you would have, for instance, within the ceiling up to 4, you would say lovud, but off the ground, if it's 4 off the ground, or more, it's within 4 from the ground, you won't say lovud. So even though if it's within 4 from the ceiling, you will, but not off the ground. Why? Because if the gediyim, the goats, can run underneath it, then the kids rather can run underneath it, then it's the mevat of the mechitza. It nullifies the shem of mechitza. If the mechitza can't block out the small animals from running underneath, it doesn't have a shem of mechitza, so he would be moida in such a case. There's a machlekes in the Rishonim in the Paiskim, when we say it's a fligim and a kaisel shloisha, if he has the lechi is away from the wall 3, so it's possible because the avir the hagis is mevatel. Well, let's say that the lechi is wider than the airspace on one side. Is it kosher in such a case? So some say yes, because it's not, the avir on this side is not going to be mevatel because it's wider than the air, but some say no. If a lechi, in such a case, if it's so far away from the wall, it does not have a shame of a lechi, even if it's wide. Rabbi Yosef Amar Rachman Gimel Tvachim Amar Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Ein halacha k'Rabbi Yosef loy behelmi v'loy belachayai. So Rabbi Yosef said, and in the name of Yehuda Shmuel, he said the halacha is not like Rabbi Yosef, not in our Mishnah legabi the din of lechi, the width of the lechi, and not legabi helmi legabi Shabbos to pickle vegetables that Chomsei in small quantities. It's what Rav Yossi says, even small quantities, it's also the Isser's in Isser D'Rabbanan because it looked like ma'abed, looked like tanning. So you're now preparing these vegetables and you're changing the consistency of it. It looks like similar to ma'abed. Rav Yossi says if small quantities is also because people will say that doing a halacha in a small quantity is also mutter, so therefore he answered it by even small quantities of helmi. Rav Yosef said the halacha is not like him in either case. You said that so by helmi, but not b'chayai. So so why do you say by helmi the halacha is not like him? Because the Rabbanan, who are the majority, they argue with him. They also argue. So what's the chilek? But there's also Rebbe who holds like Rav Yossi. So since there's Rebbe who also holds like him, therefore he did not say the halacha is not like Rav Yossi by lachi. Rav Yomi Masechet, he taught it the following way: Amar Rabbi Yehuda B'Reiter of Shmuel Bar Shilas made the Rav in halach Rabbi Yossi loy behelmi v'loy b'lechayan. The halach is not like him in either case. Amar le Amrat. So they asked him, "Did you say this?" They asked Rabbi Yehuda B'Reiter of Shmuel, "But do you say this?" And he said, "Amar lo loy." He said, "No." Amar Rav said, "Lakim Amrat." He did say it. We learned it from him. But he was chayzer. He retracted. Why was he chayzer? Because Rav Yossi is a bar samcha, and he has his rayas and he has his svoras and his tamim with him. So we're samech on Rav Yossi, even in cases where the rabbim arguing on him. What's halach l'maisa? Go and see how the people are noig. See how the people are noig, and l'maisa, which way it was accepted by the tzibor, and that's how you have to be noig. So some teach this on the following. We just said puk chazima amadavar. We just said that look how the people are noig, and that's how you kaveh the halacha. Some say it's referring to the following machlek is the following case. A person drinks water. He's thirsty and he drinks water. What bracha does he make? He makes a shahakol. Rabbi Tarafin Aimer, he says, Borin nefashos, Rabbis v'chesron, al kol masha barosa, he makes a Borin nefashos. And as Taisa speaks out in brachas, he says that this is not the Borin nefashos of bracha achreina. He says, Rabbi Tarafin, that this is a bracha rishayna, you make the Borin nefashos. So that was the machlekes. So he asked him, what's the halacha? Look and see how the people are noig. And therefore he said, but then what is a noig? That it's a shahakal beforehand, and it's a borin nefasha is for a bracha achrona, and that's how we're conveying the halacha.